I had never believed in the supernatural. Ghost stories and creepy tales were just that, stories. But then something happened to me years ago that I still can't fully explain, and no matter how hard I try, I can't shake the memory of it. It started on an ordinary night, one of those late evenings when exhaustion tugs at your body and sleep feels like the only escape. I climbed into bed, closed my eyes, and within minutes drifted into a deep sleep. But at some point in the middle of the night, I awoke. At least I thought I did. I couldn't move. It wasn't the first time I'd experienced sleep paralysis, so at first I wasn't scared. I told myself it was just a dream, that I was stuck in a halfway state between waking and sleep. But as I lay there, unable to move my body, something shifted. There was a presence in the room, an overwhelming sense of being watched. My eyes darted to the closet door across from my bed. It was slightly open. I felt a cold wave of dread sweep over me. Something was in there. I didn't see it, but I could feel it. It was like the air itself had become heavy and dark, radiating from the closet. I tried not to look, but my body betrayed me and my eyes fixated on the door. A part of me screamed that this wasn't real, that I needed to face the fear and break free. But no matter how much I tried to rationalize it, the feeling only grew stronger. My head wanted to turn away, but every time I tried, it was as if some invisible force kept pulling my gaze back to the closet. I strained my neck, desperate to stop looking, but I couldn't control it. My eyes stayed locked on that dark sliver of space between the door and the frame. And then, it moved. A low, sickening chuckle filled the room, not from my ears, but inside my head. The laughter grew. Not louder, but more suffocating, like it was coming in waves, crashing over me. I tried to scream, to call out, but no sound came. My body was pinned to the bed, helpless. The closet door creaked open a little more, and I could see it now, a shape shifting in the shadows, growing, expanding, like something awful was unfolding from the darkness. Then, before I could even process what was happening, something heavy thudded onto my chest. I felt it, cold, solid, and terribly real. I managed to glance down, and what I saw was enough to make my blood run cold. A head. A severed head staring up at me with wide, glassy eyes. The face was familiar. It was a girl I had known in high school, someone I hadn't seen in years. Her lifeless eyes were locked onto mine, her mouth hanging open, frozen in a silent scream. I tried to move, to get it off me, but I was still paralyzed. All I could do was wriggle and let out desperate, muted grunts, my chest rising and falling with shallow, panicked breaths. The laughter from the closet intensified, seeping into my bones, mocking my fear. I struggled for what felt like an eternity, the weight of the head pressing into my chest, the eyes staring into my soul. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. The pressure lifted, the laughter faded, and I shot upright in bed, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding. I was awake. I sat there, breathing heavily, my eyes darting to the closet. It was shut, just as it had been before I went to sleep. The room was still, quiet, as if nothing had happened. I convinced myself it was just a terrible nightmare, a vivid hallucination brought on by sleep paralysis. But then I noticed something on the bed, a single strand of long, dark hair. It wasn't mine. I stared at it, my skin crawling, and realized that what had happened wasn't just a dream. For weeks after that night, I would wake up, afraid to open my eyes, terrified that something would be waiting in the closet. The fear never really left me, not completely. And even now, years later, I still catch myself glancing at the closet door before I go to sleep, just to make sure it stays shut. But some nights I swear I can still hear that laughter. The summer of my 17th year was supposed to be one of those perfect, carefree breaks. My parents had sent me to Camp Redwood, a secluded camp deep in the woods. It was my first time going to an overnight camp, and honestly, I wasn't thrilled about being away from home for 3 weeks. Still, I figured it would be a fun escape with my friends, swimming in the lake, roasting marshmallows by the campfire, and sleeping under the stars. Nothing could go wrong, right? At least that's what I thought. The first few days were fine, but by the end of the first week, weird things started happening. It began with small, unexplainable noises outside our cabin at night, scratching sounds, like something was scraping against the wood. My cabin mates, Jenna and Tara, laughed it off, saying it was probably just raccoons or something, but it didn't feel right to me. There was something unsettling about those noises. Then, one night, everything changed. It was a particularly humid evening, and the air was so thick it felt hard to breathe. Jenna had gone to meet up with some of the boys from the neighboring camp, and Tara had fallen asleep early, leaving me alone in the cabin, lying awake in my bunk. I stared up at the wooden ceiling, listening to the faint rustling of the trees outside and the occasional murmur of voices from the other campers, but mostly, the cabin was silent. Too silent. I rolled over, trying to get comfortable, when suddenly I heard it again, the scratching. It was louder this time, coming from right outside the cabin door. I held my breath, listening. The scratching grew more frantic, as if whatever was outside was desperately trying to get in. My heart started racing, and I sat up in my bunk, my eyes locked on the door. Then, just as abruptly as it had started, the scratching stopped. The silence was deafening. I lay back down, trying to convince myself it was nothing, maybe a raccoon again, but before I could calm my nerves, the door creaked open. Just a sliver. I stared, paralyzed, waiting for something to appear. My mind raced, wondering if Jenna was playing a prank on me, but something told me this was different. The air felt thick with dread. And then, I saw it. A shape, barely visible in the moonlight, slipped into the cabin through the crack in the door. It was hunched, its limbs unnaturally long, its movements slow and deliberate. My breath caught in my throat as I watched it crawl across the floor, heading straight for Tara's bed. She was still sound asleep, completely unaware. I wanted to scream, to wake her up, to do anything, but I was frozen. I couldn't move. My body was locked in place, helpless as the thing reached Tara's bed, its long fingers curling around the edge of her mattress. It slowly pulled itself up, its head turning toward me. That's when I saw its face. It wasn't a person. It wasn't even an animal. Its eyes were hollow, empty voids, and its mouth was twisted into a grotesque grin. It stared at me, unblinking, as if it were waiting for something. The room felt impossibly cold, like the warmth had been sucked out of the air. Finally, I broke free from my paralysis and bolted upright, ready to scream for help. But just as I did, the thing vanished. Disappeared as if it had never been there. I gasped for breath, looking around the room. The door was closed again. Tara was still fast asleep, undisturbed. For a moment, I thought I'd imagined it all, but my heart was pounding too hard for it to have been a dream. I knew what I'd seen. I didn't sleep at all that night, my eyes glued to the door, waiting for the thing to come back. But it never did. I've had sleep paralysis 3 times in my life, but it was the 3rd time that I'll never forget. The first 2 episodes were unsettling, waking up, completely aware but unable to move. It was like being trapped in my own body. But nothing prepared me for what happened that 3rd morning. It was early, probably around 5 or 6 in the morning, with just enough light seeping through the curtains to illuminate the room faintly. I woke up, and immediately, I knew it was happening again. The paralysis set in, that familiar feeling of being completely frozen. I could only move my eyes, and they fixated on the wall across from me, my heart pounding in my chest as panic began to rise. Then I heard it, heavy footsteps on the stairs. The sound was unmistakable, and with every step, my unease grew. It didn't take long for my family to appear. First my brother, then my sister, followed by my dad and mom. But something was wrong. They weren't normal. They were taller, almost unnervingly tall, their heads nearly brushing against the ceiling. And they were sobbing, hysterically, tears streaming down their faces. I lay there, paralyzed and terrified as they approached my bed, their towering forms casting shadows over me. They just stood there, crying, looking down at me. I wanted to scream, to tell them to stop, but no sound would come out. I was trapped in my own fear. It was as if their sorrow was suffocating the air around me. Then, just as suddenly as they had appeared, they turned and walked back down the stairs, their sobs still echoing in the silence. The paralysis lifted, and I bolted upright, gasping for breath. I ran after them, down the stairs, calling their names, but when I reached the bottom, no one was there. The house was empty. Confused and shaken, I checked their rooms, one by one. My brother, my sister, my parents, they were all there, fast asleep, peaceful as if nothing had happened. My heart was racing, and I leaned against the wall to steady myself, trying to make sense of what I had just seen. But I couldn't. The whole experience was so surreal, so vivid, yet impossible. Sleep was out of the question after that. I lay awake, replaying the events in my mind, trying to convince myself it had just been a dream, a bizarre trick of my exhausted brain. Then, just a few days later, life took a sharp turn. I was out with friends, crossing the street, when a speeding car came out of nowhere. I didn't even have time to react before it hit me. The impact was brutal. 3 broken bones and a fractured thigh left me in the hospital for a week, with a blur of pain and doctors in between. On my second day there, I opened my eyes and saw my family standing by my bedside, my brother, my sister, my dad, and my mom. They were all looking down at me, my mom with tears in her eyes. It was almost identical to what I had seen during that sleep paralysis episode. The same faces, the same sorrow, the same unnerving stillness. I'm not one to believe in signs or omens, but that moment sent a chill down my spine. It felt too close, too familiar. It was like I had seen a glimpse of the future, a silent warning of what was to come. Even as I tell this now, I can't help but feel that icy sensation crawl up my back. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me. But maybe, just maybe, it was something more.